today I'm going to talk about our forecast for the semiconductor industry. And I'm going to start with some of what we see the economics as the industry approaches $500 billion. The industry really has to deal with the overall economics. So as you see over here, this is what the GDP for some of the major countries are for 2018, and then our forecast for 2019. And as many of you know, we're looking at some slower economic growth and some headwind for the overall economy and the semiconductor industry. The two largest regions are the U.S. and China, and with that we're seeing monetary tightening, consumer prices starting to rise, and the business cycle slowing with increased tariffs, labor shortages, a lot of uncertainty out there, as well as we've seen some oil prices rising. One of the things I look at is when we look for how strong the economy is, and the U.S. being the largest economy in the world tends to drive the overall world economy along with China. So what I've done here, one of the things I look at is the bond yield curve. And if you go back to 1970, every time the yield curve was inverted, we went into a recession. So you can see here, after the recession of 2009, the yield curve went up, and it's been declining for almost 10 years. And just this last month, it hit zero. So the trend is not good, and if history repeats itself from 1970, it looks like we're very close to going into a recession in the U.S. So not the greatest news, but we have seen a 10-year expansion. If the economy continues to be positive in the U.S. about through June of 2019, we'll see a 10-year growth cycle, which is pretty unprecedented for in historical terms. But I wanted to spend some time talking about the end markets that drive the semiconductor industry. And although I just said that there's some headwinds with the economy, there are some driving markets that are giving the semiconductor industry some tailwind. And one of them is IoT. It's driving the internet bandwidth and servers, and a lot of over here. I just put a few things out here, but there's a lot of data being developed at the edge, and from automobiles, which I'll talk about a little later, smart cities, science, construction, finance. I put a cow in here because it's pretty interesting, because in Arizona we have a lot of dairy farms. And of course, in the summer it's 120 degrees and it's hot and dry, and cows don't like to produce milk when they're hot. So what many of them have done is that each cow has a biosensor on it, connected to a server, and they can tell if the cow is stressed or overheated. And they have they built giant shade areas, and they have misters that spray fine amount of water and large fans, and it's all controlled through the server. So when the cows are stressed, they put out more water, raise the fan level, and the cows are happy and they produce more milk. So it's just one example of how IoT and artificial intelligence will start to help our overall economy and be more productive and eventually really lower costs. But what we see there is that a lot of the data is going to go to the network and have some local decisions, but the critical data and the analysis still is going to be done in the cloud, which is driving the overall bandwidth. Another application that's a good tailwind for the semiconductor industry is vision systems. And we're seeing that across the board in the automotive industry, of course, as well as industrial and medical for factory floor automation. And there's amazing amounts of things done for medical, robotic surgeries, and other smart medical technology. Using AI and vision systems in the medical field, there's a lot of studies that show that you get 80% better diagnostic results than with traditional doctors. Of course, the infrastructure, smart cities, and military and aerospace. But there are some things dragging down the semiconductor industry, and some of the traditional markets are slowing. Many years ago, desktop PCs were the big driver of the industry. They've come down quite a bit, and they're still declining. We're showing a 7% decline down to 60 million units. Laptops have been declining for a number of years, but we actually are showing a 1% increase to 194 million units. And the smartphone market, which is the largest consumer of semiconductors, is starting to slow down. We have a -1% decline, and that's really driven by the high end of the basic phone. So when you look at the flagship, like the Galaxy from Samsung or the iPhones from Apple, that high-end part of the market is going to decline 3.7% this year. The low-end and mid-range smartphones are still increasing at 10%, and the basic feature phones are declining at 14%. So that, when you total that up, we're just slightly down at -1%. But it is a huge market at 2 billion units. But there are a bunch of growth markets, and these are just a couple of them. So this picture on the upper right is a picture of a Google server farm, and 90% of the world's data has been developed in the last few years, and that amount of data does not look like it's going to be slowing down. So servers, we think, will grow 20% to over 30 million units. Smart speakers is a relatively new application. Going to be 83 million units this year, growing 45%. It had a great year last year. And although the automotive market is at 1%, it's having a little hard time this year with the economics. But there's 125 million vehicles produced each year, and the semiconductor content is growing rapidly. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. One of the areas is electric vehicles. And I apologize, most of my stuff is done in billions of units and millions. So this actually should be thousands, not millions. So in the US, it's 300,000 electric vehicles, really driven by Tesla. The interesting thing is that electric vehicles in the US surged 81% last year in 2018. Europe actually is leading electric sales per capita, but it is a smaller market. And then you look at China. China's like 2x what the U.S. is. So we're at about 2% penetration rate for electric vehicles, and electrification is going to continue. And that's why we see almost every semiconductor industry company is focusing on automotive, because it is the next big market. We track the automotive market, and it's sort of an eye chart, but these are all the electronic systems that we track. And the thing I wanted to just point out is autonomous driving kind of goes throughout all of these end systems, and we'll also see a lot of AI in the automotive market to help drive that. Light green and the black really dominate the industry, and you can see here in the last 2 years with the shortages, memory has really shot up. What's in this green bar is all the MOS logic, so that's your standard cells, your programmable logic, your Wi-Fi, your Bluetooth, all of the basically most of the products that the foundries like TSMC and Samsung and Global Foundries make, and they're showing very good growth. This year, 2019, we're forecasting $481 billion, basically a flat market, minus 0.1%. Next month, we'll be revising our forecast as we get the final 2018, and really I think there's more of a downside of that revision than an upside. By 2022, the market will reach $555 billion, and that will be a 3.2% growth in that year. So even though we've got some headwinds on the economic side, I think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of end markets that will continue to help drive the semiconductor industry compared to many years ago when it was just a PC-driven market.